Happy Friday, Year 10. You've made it through another week. You must be feeling absolutely delighted. It's the end of the week. Well done for those of you that did your first days in school. It was certainly lovely seeing you in the flesh and in person. Well done for those of you that are in school quite frequently in the blue or the purple or the green zone. I cannot emphasise enough how proud we are of you and how well you've been working in English. So do keep up the great work. So, last lesson. This was the final slide that I wanted you to think about, and it was, why do you think that Christmas may have been especially important to the Victorian working classes and the poor? And it was lovely that so many of you messaged me your ideas, actually, so thank you for that. And you're absolutely right, it was a chance to celebrate and forget and to connect with a higher feeling and sense of self, because Christmas is a religious celebration. So for many of the Victorians in Victorian England, they would have enjoyed that time to connect with the spiritual self and everything that that embodies, to do with generosity and charity and thinking of each other. But also in the Victorian time, Queen Victoria herself started many of the traditions that we associate with Christmas, such as decorating a Christmas tree and having an abundance and huge amounts of food. And it was just a lovely chance for people to get together and indulge and overeat and be together as a family. So yes, for those of you that got in touch, you're absolutely right. Christmas was a time for them to forget their troubles and to just celebrate being with each other and enjoying good food and good company. So this lesson, we're going to focus a little bit more on the text. So we were looking at the much bigger picture last lesson. We were looking at the context of when the novel was written and when it was set. And now we're going to go into the actual text itself, and we're going to look at when we are first introduced to Fred. And we're going to look at the introduction of Fred and his role within the novella. We're going to recap and revise some key terminology. We're going to read a little extract, and then we're going to look for techniques which we revised in the terminology that Dickens has used. And then you're going to take a very short quiz to consolidate your learning and to check that everything has made sense today. So, some new words for some of you. These may be terms that you've already heard. Now, Fred is the antithesis of Scrooge. Fred is the complete opposite. He is the contrast of Scrooge. So there is that word there, antithesis. I would like you please to write the title, Introduction to Fred. In fact, if I go back there, there is your title, Introduction of Fred is your title. And then you're going to put this key term there, antithesis, and it means the opposite. Fred is a character constructed by Dickens, and he embodies one vision and one value, and that is of Christmas and giving and kindness and warmth and generosity. And then we have Scrooge, who is the antithesis of Fred. He is the opposite of Fred, and he symbolises cold, isolation, not being generous, being quite the opposite, being tight-fisted, a Scrooge, a miser, only looking out for himself. You could draw some lines, some parallel connections to do with an Inspector Calls. We have got the younger characters of Sheila and Eric change, and they embody that socialist view, the same as Fred, versus Mr. and Mrs. Burling, who has that capitalist view of self versus responsibility. Okay, so Fred, when we meet him, we have a description of Fred, and he is described as being warm and jolly and lovely, and he, in his description when we first meet him, provides a complete contrast to Scrooge, both in physical appearance and in manner in which they speak and in what they say. Another new idea that some of you may have heard before is that of a motif. Now, a motif is a repeated idea. We can sometimes call it a theme, but with a motif it tends to be something quite symbolic. And throughout the extract that we're looking at, and certainly throughout the novella as a whole, the motif of fire is repeated. Now, fire itself has got many connotations. Remember, connotations are words associated and other meanings that come with that word, and depending on where you're hearing it, depends on how you interpret that word. So fire could mean creation, but it could also be destructive. It's something that is quite beautiful, but it's also that something that could be seen as quite evil. It transforms things. It's warm. We think of fireplaces and getting together, also thinking of survival. Now, when we come across a description of fire in A Christmas Carol, I want you to really think about and notice, what does that motif of fire mean at that particular point of the novel? Is it to represent a spark of an idea? Is it to represent warmth? Or is it to show destruction or transformation? So, 3 things that we are going to do today is we're going to look at an extract, and you're going to look at the ideas and techniques that Dickens has used to create a specific meaning within that extract. And things you're going to focus on are those icons you can see on the left. You're going to see what you notice. So those eyes are to do with, what do you physically see? What's being described that you can see? So what action is happening? What do you see the characters doing? What are they described as looking like? Can you look for adjectives and verbs that are positive or maybe negative? So what do you notice? The second one is punctuation. So punctuation has been used in this particular extract to create pace, but also to show uncertainty and to show heightened emotions between the two characters. So Fred and Scrooge have quite a lively exchange, and I want you to pay careful attention to the use of an exclamation mark, which is that one there for those of you that cannot remember, and your question mark. Lots of questions are being asked of each other, questioning their beliefs about Christmas, and lots of comments are being made, exclaiming in response to that, to their beliefs of each other. So how and why is punctuation being used? And then again, we're looking for repetition of the motif. So repetition, you can see the symbol there, on and on and on and on and on. Repetition could be words and phrases, but in particular, I'm looking for that motif, that idea of anything to do with fire that's repeated in the extract. Okay? Here's the extract. So I'm going to read it aloud to you. Put your little noticing eyes on, get your listening ears switched on, and let's see what you can spot. If you can hear the motif of fire, whether you can see the antithesis emphasised between Fred and Scrooge in their contrasting ideas of Christmas. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself with rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, uncle," said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I am sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas? What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said "Bah" again, and followed it up with "Humbug." "Don't be cross, uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be," returned the uncle, "when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books and having every item in 'em through a round dozen of months presented dead against you? If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should." So, first time we hear Fred speak, first time we meet him, and he arrives very quickly, adverb there, very quickly, and Scrooge himself didn't even know that he was coming. He didn't physically see him. The first thing that we hear Fred say is, "A Merry Christmas, God save you." So from the first and foremost thing that Fred says is a Merry Christmas. He is there representing the Victorians who loved and enjoyed and celebrated Christmas. But he is referred to by his Uncle Scrooge as being poor. And therefore Scrooge is saying he hasn't a right to celebrate Christmas because he is poor. And it goes back to that lesson that you had on Monday, where you've got that big contrast of attitudes between the rich and the poor. So Fred and Scrooge here are contrasted characters. They're contrasted because Fred, he embodies the Christian values of Christmas. He enjoys Christmas. It's the first thing he says. He is positive and warm, but he's also poor. Yet he will still embody that socialist idea, if you like, of responsibility and looking out for each other. Whereas Scrooge is the opposite. He's rich and he does not believe in Christmas, does not believe in being responsible for one another. He believes in your own self. Okay, so we're going to focus now on a quotation. And what I would like you to do is pause this video and copy that quotation in the green box in the very middle there, down in your book. So currently you will have in your book the title Fred. You will have the notes that you made on what antithesis means. You will have the notes on the symbol, the motif of fire. And you'll now have this quotation written down in your book. He had so heated himself, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked. So take a moment to pause this video and copy that quotation down in your book, please. Okay, so we're going to start in the red box and work our way around discussing and writing down our thoughts and ideas on the prompts that are in the different coloured boxes. The first one is methods. Can you highlight and label the method or methods that Dickens has used in this quotation? What can you spy? Hopefully you will have noticed that we have got positive description to do with Fred. He was in a glow. If you're glowing, there is connotations of health and happiness and being well. So make sure that you have underlined glow and you have written down positive description through the word glow, and the connotations of glow is warmth, health, happiness. Now fires also glow, and we'll come back to that in a moment. His eyes sparkled. So they're describing there his eyes, they sparkled. There's a sense of health, again, of warmth, of life, of virality. They're shining, they're twinkling. Really positive description about his eyes. And if someone's got a sparkle in their eyes, we have associations of that with someone that we trust and someone who we would like to know. I believe that Dickens is describing Fred in a positive way because he wants the reader to have a positive association with the character. Now it links us to the yellow box. So a method that Dickens has used in that quotation is that of the references to fire. There are fire references here. He had so heated himself. He's heated himself. He was in a glow. His face was ruddy. If you've got ruddy cheeks, they're red because you're warm. His eyes were sparkling and his breath smoked. Now this isn't because he's had a cigarette, this is because it's ever so cold. But he could have said you could see his breath in the coldness. But Dickens has decided to describe his breath as smoking. So it's a metaphor. We've got this extended metaphor here of a fire, that motif of a fire to describe Fred when we first meet him. He says, "A Merry Christmas." So what he says is Christmas, Merry Christmas. We know from the offset he's representing Christmas, but he's also described with the motif of fire, heated, glow, ruddied, sparkled. Let me just skip back to what that could mean. I don't think it means that Fred is a destructive character. I think it is to do with the idea of warmth, of togetherness, maybe of creation, I don't know, but it's that warmth and fireplaces and family. So Fred is described there with that fire, to contrast, I believe, with the coldness, the literal physical coldness of Scrooge, but also the metaphorical coldness he has in his approach to mankind. So either rewind the video or pause it just to make some notes there that Scrooge's nephew has got those repeated motif language descriptions because he's embodying that warm idea there with the fire. Okay, synthesize. So that blue box down there, can you find 3 words that are related to one another and explain what they convey about Fred to the reader? So you might want to say heated, glow, ruddy, because they're 3 words that are all to do with being warm, and they convey to us that he is very warm. Maybe you want to identify 3 words: sparkled, smoked and heated, and what they convey to us. This is where I need you to trust yourself and just look at the 3 words that you think are related to one another and what they convey to Fred. And it doesn't matter if you're repeating ideas that you wrote in methods or motifs. Okay, now that last one, contrast. This description of Fred's warmth with his antithesis, Ebenezer Scrooge. Can you contrast this particular description of Fred to how we know Scrooge? Can you choose a quotation that illustrates the difference between them? Now you can use a quotation from here, or stretch and challenge. See if you can recall a different part in the novella when Scrooge is describing. He's described as being tight-fisted. He's described as being cold, as solitary as an oyster. Now, if you're not able to do this yet, that's okay, because you'll be able to do it a bit later on, but you can always use this time to go and research and find your own quotation. Good. So, we've got 2 more tasks left. This one here, where we're going to talk through some things that you can say about this particular extract. Then I'll tell you what the additional task is. If you want to, that's a challenge task, and then the last thing you need to do is complete this quiz. So, in this extract, Dickens is presenting attitudes towards Christmas. He is presenting Fred's attitude to Christmas, and he is presenting Scrooge's attitude to Christmas. And there are 5 things I want you to do, and you can, excuse me, you can write these down in your English book, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can write down your notes, maybe your voice recording your ideas down. Maybe you would like to print this sheet out and highlight and make your own notes. I don't have a working printer at home, so will not ever set you work where you require a printer, because I know what an obstacle that is. So it's up to you. However you answer these questions, I want you to have answered them, whether it is saying them out loud, writing down your notes, having a spider diagram. So, starting with this extract, explore how Dickens presents attitudes to Christmas here, and for those of you who can, elsewhere in the novel. Christmas is brought up in very different points, at different points in the novel. What is it that's being said? Okay, number 1. I want you to be able to say a point, something about the question, and then find a quotation to back it up. So, number 1, what can you say about Fred's attitude to Christmas? You might want to say he's very passionate about it, or he is a supporter of it, or he's persuasive in his attempt to get Scrooge to embody it. And can you find a quotation that backs it up? So what can you say about Fred's attitude to Christmas, and can you find a quotation to back it up? I would be inclined to say he's very persuasive and strong in his beliefs about Christmas, and he uses persuasive language actually, and lots of rhetorical questions. He's questioning him constantly. He's very quick. He even stumps Scrooge when it comes here, where he says, on the spur of the moment, Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said bah, and followed it up with humbug. So I love the fact that Fred's attitude to Christmas is so positive and driving. He drills him with questions. You know, he returns, come then, what right have you got to be dismal? What reason have you got to be morose? You're rich enough. Rhetorical question, short impact statement. Okay, point 2. Pause the video if you need to write more things down for point 1. Point 2. What can you say about Scrooge's attitude to Christmas? So in this extract, what could you say about Scrooge's attitude to Christmas, and what quotation would you use to back that up? And things we have described, you can say it's the antithesis of Fred. He's just as passionate in his hatred towards Christmas. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't think the poor are entitled to it. He believes that money is an indicating factor on whether you can celebrate Christmas or not. And bar humbug would be a good quotation to use that. Or he calls people who celebrate Christmas idiots, and actually says they should be boiled. It's quite aggressive, although it's humorous, it's quite aggressive. He thinks they should be boiled with a stake of holly driven through their hearts. So pause the video and just, however you're making your notes here, what can you say about Scrooge's attitude to Christmas, and where's your quotation to back it up? Okay, number 3. Which character's attitude to Christmas do you think Dickens wants the reader to agree with? Do you think the reader wants us to agree with Fred, that Christmas should be celebrated regardless of wealth and circumstance? Or do you think Dickens wants us to agree with Scrooge and think people shouldn't celebrate Christmas, especially those who have no money or reason to be cheerful? And you could try and find a quotation there. Again, I might be inclined to say it's Fred. I do hope you've written Fred. He does want us to agree with Fred. Fred is likeable. He is kind, but also he's so quick-witted, he stumps him. He leaves his uncle, he approaches without him being ready, and he absolutely slays him in the little exchange they had when he had no better answer ready. And I think Dickens has made sure that Fred is the wordsmith and the superior character here. So he's left speechless, basically. So pause the video and write down your notes there. Okay, question 4. Does Scrooge's attitude to Christmas change? Where does it change? When does it change? And why? So we know he's shown Christmases of his past, when he's a small boy, and he was very sad actually about seeing himself as that lonely boy in a room in front of a feeble fire. We see the Christmases of present, where he gets to see the Cratchits celebrating Christmas, and what a warm and lovely affair that is. And also he gets to see his nephew's celebration of Christmas, and he gets to see future Christmases, the one where Tiny Tim is no longer with them. When do you think Scrooge's attitude to Christmas changes? Where, when and why? Now you might not know the answer to question 4 yet, and that's okay. I'm not going to tell you. This is for you to build upon and add to your notes. And the last one, again, another stretch and challenge. You may or may not be able to answer this one yet, but if you can't now, you certainly will in the next week or so. What do you know about the theme of Christmas? So if you think back to what I said on that slide there, being especially important to the Victorian working classes. What do you know about the theme of Christmas and what it embodies? Christianity, sharing, responsibility for others, charity, hope, positivity, togetherness. Does it link to this extract? What's the wider message that Dickens might be trying to say here, thinking about that last lesson and what Dickens and other few Victorians were doing in terms of the plight of the poor? So just pause the video and make sure you've got some notes down for them. Well done, Year 10. So the last essential learning that you have is to complete this quiz. Okay, so you click on the link and it will take you to a Google's Forms. I'll show you that in a moment, see if it will work. Now your additional challenge task, for those of you that are up for it, and I actually think quite a few of you can and should start thinking about doing this. Can you write the answer out to this question using those notes in full sentences? Basically a bit of an essay. Starting with this extract, explore how Dickens presents attitudes to Christmas. If you can do it up to that point, brilliant. Even better, here and elsewhere in the novel. So let's see if this form will let me click onto it. Yeah, there we go. So you just click on this form and it will take you through. And look at that. This is because I'm on my husband's laptop and I haven't given him permission to view this form. So you will click on that and it will work. What a brilliant end. So that's your essential learning, okay? So get that done. So if you need to rewatch this video, do get going, but we've revised key terminology such as motif and antithesis, and it was the motif of fire in particular. We've looked at the extract when we first meet Fred and his role within the novella, and that's to embody the message of Christmas and Dickens' personal view of Christmas, to contrast with Scrooge, and yeah, make the readers think about who we agree with. Off you go, enjoy. I'll know when you've taken the quiz because it will notify me, so you don't actually have to submit anything, you just take the quiz.